Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zilinskas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I'm Rosie Zilinskas, your podcast host. Today we continue the How to Negotiate in the Corporate World series. This is the 4th episode out of 8, and we're going to be talking to Elissa D. So let me tell you a little bit about Elissa. She is your go-to general counsel providing legal and business solutions concerning relationships, growth, strategy, trade secrets, and a few more things. She appreciates the intricacies faced by women in business and as entrepreneurs and works with clients on a powerful negotiating mindset. Elissa is going to give us a few tips on how she negotiates with her clients. And the one thing that we're going to talk about is know what you want and figure out how to get what you want. So with that, stay tuned for my conversation with Elissa D. Hey guys, really quick, before we get into today's episode, I just want to remind you that if you go on my website, nowomanleftbehind.com, there are some awesome resources on here. First of all, on the home page, on the top right-hand corner, there is a Kickstart Your Career radio button, and this is the Corporate Kickstart course. It's about 45 minutes, and if you don't know where to start in your career, that's a great course for you to start with. Next, there is a radio button that says, I'm ready for my corner office. If you are at the point where you want to talk to somebody and want to have a consultation with me, you can click on this and it'll take you to my calendar and you will be able to answer a short questionnaire, and you and I can talk for about 30 minutes about where you are versus where you want to be in your career. If you continue to scroll down on that same page, there is a section that says, let's find out where you are in your career. And there's another radio button that says, take the quiz. This is the Corporate Kickstart quiz. So it'll take you about 10 minutes to take that quiz, but it'll give you some great information. And if you scroll all the way down on that main page, you will see some additional freebies that you can download, which are the Believe in Yourself, and this is 3 steps for women in corporate to stop being left behind. So you click on that Learn More button, you can download that one. There's also the Conversation Starters Checklist, and again, you can click on that Learn More button to download that one. And then finally, the Productivity Strategies Workbook that you can figure out how to be more productive. And you can download that one by going to the Learn More. So again, these are just some awesome resources that I just wanted to make you aware. And now we are going on to our episode. Okay, Elissa, thank you so much for being here on the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. Last time you and I spoke about the fact that we are talking about women in the corporate world and negotiating. I know that you had mentioned that women tend to negotiate with themselves first before they actually go into the negotiation process. So let's talk about that.
Yes, and thank you again, Rosie, for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here. And I've definitely seen in my years, I had about 10 years in-house counsel, and then in all my years practicing as an attorney, one of the things I tend to do is counsel women to go in strong, because very often women are afraid to hurt feelings, or they're afraid if there's a particular job description or promotion that's available, if they don't have one thing on that list, that they're not worthy. They don't ask for more than what they think they deserve. being able to come in to a particular point. I think culturally, that's how a lot of us were raised, and it just takes practice to get beyond that, because usually men don't have that problem. And you don't want to go in and be seen as too aggressive, perhaps, but sometimes depending on the culture, it's not a bad thing, and it's good to know your worth.
Absolutely. Now, when you say that women, we tend to negotiate with ourselves, what does that look like to an actual individual? And of course, we have women in the world that are listening. Is it like fighting with yourself, within in your brain? Like how does that negotiation happen, do you think?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I've seen this over and over again. And it's interesting from an outsider looking in, because I see these tremendous women who doubted themselves. So what happens is you're going to go into negotiation and you say, well, I'd like this. And then you say, but the other side is going to say that, or maybe they won't want this, or if I do this, and you already have carried out the negotiation before you walk in the room. And that doesn't do you any favors. My theory is ask for the moon and see what happens. The best thing they could do is say yes. The worst thing they could do is say no. Usually everybody walks away with something in between, and that makes you happy. And that also helps with the relationships when you're working in the corporate world. The relationships you have in your office and with your superiors and with your team are so important. So to go in knowing your value and feeling strong about your negotiation and having a plan, and practicing is really good. I always say, like, choreography, muscle memory is so helpful. So when you're going into a negotiation, it's really good to have practiced. What are my points? What am I not going to negotiate? What am I okay with giving away? Because it's always good to give something so that the other side feels like they're getting something in exchange.
Sure, absolutely. I know I had a conversation with a woman once that I was coaching, and she had a specific number in mind that she was going to go in and have the conversation. And then when she was actually having the conversation, her number dropped, and she didn't even know why she did that. She said at the end of the conversation, she's like, why did I do that?
Because she wanted to make it easier for the other person. And that is something we do naturally, which is why I definitely practicing is so good, because you don't then fall into that pattern, which is our pattern of our entire lives. Then when you get that, it's so empowering that you just want to, and then you say, why didn't I ask for more? So yeah.
So in this negotiating series that I'm doing, I'm doing 8 different podcasts, and we're having conversations solely around negotiating for women in the corporate world. And one of the things that I'm going to create out of this is a workbook. And part of that workbook is going to be script out what you're going to
say. Oh, that's great.
Is, one thing. And then another piece is also practice it with someone that you trust, whether it's a family member or a coworker or whatever. But to your point, practicing so that you're not stuck with the words and trying to fumble and find the words, that's going to be pretty huge.
Practicing in front of the mirror is also good. I definitely want to add that. Your trusted people, friends, when you're in the car, when you're in front of the mirror, because you also want to make sure you don't have like a crazy face when somebody says something back, and that as much as you may feel it, you don't cry. Like, there are certain things you just want to go in strong and confident. Yeah.
Absolutely. I like that. Now, I've also heard, just to add to that as well, I've also heard people record themselves and then hear it back. You can record yourself on your phone. So kind of like a little bit similar to that. Now, you had mentioned that women want to make things easier for the other person. They don't want to seem pushy, and they're more concerned about hurt feelings. Whose feelings are they concerned about, their own or the other person?
Oh, the person across the table, or the group of people, or I don't want to say this about every woman, because there are definitely some women who are powerhouses. But I think that there are a lot of women who potentially could be powerhouses who may be holding themselves back because they also don't want to make a ripple. And they're also, this goes to negotiating with yourself. You don't know who else may be up for the job or who else may be considered for the promotion. So it's a weird mindset where you just have to go in, and the hardest thing to do is sell yourself. But I truly believe that if you have a plan, and it sounds like this is what you're going to be putting in your book, to have a plan, to have a strategy, to be able to not have rehearsed answers, but any kind of question that comes out, you have your theme that you want to get across in your answer, and that you do come across as strong and confident. Yes, I've got this. Of course I do. This is why you need me. This is why I would be great for the job. And also have some questions available. Don't say yes to everything at first. Really think about it, especially if something's offered. It's good to counter, especially there's usually a range. So you don't know what the low end or the high end of the range, unless you're in New York City at this point. Actually, New York City has to post what the range is, but it's not like that everywhere. So I think having a plan and a strategy and practicing all of this together is good. And it's also really nice to do the exercise looking back over your career to really pinpoint the benchmarks. And after doing that, and it's a lot of work to do, but once you've done that, you realize just how good you are. Yes. And how lucky this position would be, this particular company would be to have you in this position. It is really a cool exercise.
It is a cool exercise. Yep. And one of the things, so my workbook is I'm titling it Know Your Worth Workbook, because so many of us talk about or read books or articles and it says, know your worth, but none of them are detailed. So, things that I read, it's just not detailed enough. So I'm detailing all that out of like looking at your core values, maybe a mission statement, things like that. But to your point, it's a process. It's not going to be a sit down once and done type thing, because there's going to be research that you need to do. You need to go on different websites to see what the particular job that you're seeking pays, the ranges. Now, you also said that New York City has to post, and that's part of and that just happened, I think, November 1st.
Yeah, that's new.
Recently. Yeah. Yep. So that's part of the pay transparency laws. And I think right now there's only about 17 states that have those pay transparency laws. Right. And some states require for the employer to post it. Other states, the individual has to request the information.
It can never hurt to ask. I mean, it's always ask. And also it's so important, and I'm glad you're doing this with your workbook. It's so important to know what you want, but it's just as equally important, and you're in just as much of a position of strength to know what you don't want. Yeah. Because often women will take on more than what we should. So if something else is thrown at you and the promotion is there, it's a ton more work, but it may not be as much money as you want. It's okay to say no to some of what's in the job description. Various different ways of negotiating around, knowing in advance what your capacity is, because one of the biggest things now, especially in the corporate world, I definitely see this in the not-for-profit world, is capacity, wellness, just being burnt out. People are still in trauma since the pandemic, since the past couple of years, and taking on the job of 2 or 3 people is not necessarily the best thing for anyone's health.
I think that's brilliant what you just said, that it's okay for you to say, I don't want to have this part of the job. Yep. And I recently spoke to somebody that said every time they had a conversation with their manager, the manager always started the conversation with, it's okay to say no.
Wow.
I think that's pretty powerful from a management perspective, because it empowers the individual to say no comfortably without, being afraid of hurting their feelings. The manager.
That is a good manager.
Yeah, that is a
also,
great manager.
Having the plan around saying no is important too, especially if you're looking for a job or a promotion, to say, this is not something that I feel like I would have the capacity to do because I want to do my best in what I'm doing. However, here's how I think we could deal with this. And then have a delegation plan or have team members or something, because it's always good to have, and I think as women, we do this anyway, but it's good to have some sort of creative solution so that they can see you really have been thinking about it.
Absolutely. I like that. So empowering yourself to say no is huge as well. Yes. Now, I know that you talk or teach some of your clients how to change their mindset for power, to be a power negotiator. What are some steps that you use to assist someone to become that power negotiator?
Very good question. It's similar to what we've been discussing. I will say, first of all, what do you want? That I always start with, I want to know, and really listen and have them say what they want and listen to it. And then once we get past the negotiating with yourself, what they really want out of this, and then we go into, okay, so how do we get this? How do we do what you need to do? What are the parameters? With whom will you be speaking? How many people do you have to go through? Are you meeting with many people on different days? What is your top range? What is your bottom number? You know, what do you see yourself in terms of like, what do you bring to the position? What do you want to suggest? Do you want to bring people with you? There are a lot of different questions to ask. Are you jumping from one career to another? It's in a very different environment. Are you aware of the culture? How do you feel about that? All of these things go into the process. And then once we have an idea of what she really wants, and she's getting excited about it, a little bit nervous, but more excited, then we really start to practice. And then it's a lot of, like I said, really knowing your worth, going through the interview questions, trying to figure out 2 or 3 themes that really show who the candidate is. And no matter what question is asked or what scenario is thrown out, that theme can get through.
Got it. Now, do you, as an attorney, do you negotiate on behalf of your clients at this point?
I do. And I have to answer as an attorney. It depends. I always offer them the option. Very often it's easier for me to say, you have your relationship, keep that and blame the lawyer. Let me take on whatever's happening. You could say, my lawyer said I have to, or let me do the negotiation. And I always also absolutely go through everything I'm going to say with my client first and make sure I have buy-in, because I would never presume to ask for something that I don't have authority to do.
Sure.
But so that they know what's going on behind the scenes. But at the same time, if I'm going to negotiate because they really do need to keep that relationship, I can go in and be stronger, and they can be like, my attorney really said, and I'm really sorry, but I have to do this. And that gives them the freedom to kind of go about their business and maintain the relationship.
That makes so much sense. Now, another thing that I'm going to be putting together as part of this series is powerful phrases. Mm-hmm. So what are some phrases that you might recommend for your clients to have like in their back pocket if things aren't going, if they're either going well or not going well?
Well, one of the 2 powerful phrases are yes and no. Okay. I mean, those are the most basic ones. Yes, I can. No, I don't think I want that. Or no, I don't want that. And then other things like, of course, or yes, this is something about which I'm really excited. I've been thinking about this for a while. I have some strategies I'd like to share with you. I've been talking to my team and we're working out certain things, and I really feel a way to lead my team to excel. Also, if you're going to be joining like a much bigger team, to be able to raise the people who are under you higher so that they really want to excel. A lot of it is about how you are as a leader, I think, in terms of how you really answer this kind of question. So I think it depends on the person also. If you're a more aggressive person, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean, if you really are forefront, there are very strong phrases that you could use. If you're a little bit more of an introvert or an ambivert, I think very often those folks say less, but when they do speak, it means a lot more. Mm-hmm. So it really depends on the personality and the leadership style. Women in general tend to be more collaborative, not always, but in general. So I think also speaking collaboratively is nice, because it shows that you are not going to go in and like rule with an iron fist, but you're going to go in, and even though you're the ultimate decision maker, we'll be working in a collaborative way so that the team feels like there's buy-in, that kind of thing.
Got it.
And I'm a huge proponent of not using corporate lingo. I think that that's used a lot like business speak, and I'm a big proponent of speaking in just plain English.
Okay, so let's say you're offered, a salary. Let's talk with salary. So let's say you're trying to negotiate salary and it's just not meeting your needs at all. Like it's way below what you were expecting. What is a good rebuttal that someone can say when it's just not anywhere near where you thought it would be?
Now, let me ask you a question. Is this for a promotion or a new job?
A new job. I was thinking
a new job. Okay. Then I would say, that actually is not a reasonable salary for the work that you're asking me to do. What can we work on? where can we meet in the middle? Another option is, depending on what it's worth to you, how about you throw in 2 extra weeks of vacation? How about, depending on the laws, can my medical benefits start sooner? Or other ways. There's more than money.
Yes.
You have to figure out, what is your currency? Is it really all about the money for you? Or are there other ways to work in where you kind of get what you want? And do you want to work from home 4 days a week? Does that mean more to you than being in the office for FaceTime? Then you may be willing to take a little bit less. Or I work for 4 months. We see how this works. Then then you kind of get an acceleration clause. At a certain point, if there are benchmarks, let's set the benchmarks. At certain points, if I hit it, it's not even like a commission base. It depends on what the job is. But there are definitely different creative problem solving ways to do it. But I would say, if you're really far from the numbers, don't take the job. That's the strength of no again. I mean, it's really good to know your value, unless you absolutely have to take a job. And I'm not, it's a big deal to work. But a lot of it is, it's harder to ask for more when you take a lower amount. It's easier to go in getting the higher salary.
And I think women a lot of times are just, it goes back to like how we're socialized. We're just grateful for whatever's given.
Yes.
Instead of, no, like you said, I know my worth and I need X, Y, or Z, versus, yes, I'll just take the job. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And part of it is, they're paying for all of your previous expertise. You've done the work in school. You got the degrees. You've been in the jobs. You've proved yourself. They're interviewing you for a reason. So make it worth their while, and they need to make it worth your while.
Absolutely.
And if it's not a good fit, again, it's okay to walk away, because if they will not budge and they do expect you to work 80-hour weeks, you got to think about what's it worth to you.
I totally agree. I love that you're not giving permission, but noting that it's okay to not settle for a job that just does not meet your needs. Now, it's different if it meets your needs, and it would be, I call it, the Goldilocks syndromes, where you ask for, the castle in the sky, and that's too much, but you and you don't want too little, so you want it just right. Or you're like, not just happy, but satisfied that for you and for the employer, that you're both getting a good deal, and that you're going to bring things to the table, and then at the same time you're getting some good benefits in return.
And that's when it can also be creative. If it's not as high as you'd like, that's when you say, how about the vacation flexibility, or or other things like that. Or, I want to bring in this person who I really love and I've worked with, and I'd like that person to come in on my team. So then the on-ramping is not as difficult. Then you already have some, various things like that you can do.
Exactly. One other thing that I typically recommend people when they're getting a new job is, one of the strengths that you can showcase is come in with an integration plan, like a 90-day integration plan. And this would be at the interview stage, more of showing your employer that you're really, and you said it earlier, that you've been thinking about it and how you're going to integrate yourself in the team, whether you're an individual contributor, but more of a manager. This is more of a manager, and how they're going to fit into the company. And I always say the first 30 days is just people centric. You have to focus on people, meet people, figure out, where all the key players are. And then you start integrating yourself into the business.
Yes. It's also, you said the culture again, and the people. I had a friend recently who's been interviewing around at various companies, and one company had her take one of the it wasn't Myers-Briggs, but it was something else like that, the personality kind of test.
Yes.
And then that she had to do like a mini SAT. I'm not quite sure what the second one was for, but the first one was interesting because she really, the results really did show the people with whom she would work best. And I think that it's important going in to know also who's on this team. Are these people who are glass half full? Are these people who are always up? Like, how will it be? It's important to meet the people and really get a good feeling, because that's all part of it. It's more than the money's a big deal, but it's more than the money, because you're going to be spending so much time around these people. Is it a good fit?
Yes, I totally agree with that. Now, can you maybe think of a couple of maybe examples that you worked with a client that you can kind of showcase a similar situation that we've been discussing?
Yes, I had a client who was going in for kind of a CFO position. I don't think it was a CFO. I think it was one level under because she was interviewing with the CFO. And it was the C-suite.
Okay.
And what's interesting is they also throw out, and very often when you're getting into the upper levels and in management, they will let you know in advance or just throw out scenarios in the moment of like almost like workshopping through an example. This happens or that happens. Or in this case, they were like, here, we sent you our books for like some particular things in the budget for the past year. She had to go through and talk about how she would, improve on certain things or analyze certain things and really come out. Now, I'm a lawyer, numbers are not my thing, but we really talked about and strategized what would the plan be. We didn't know what questions they would ask necessarily. We knew the basic one in the back way, but she knew the people in general. She didn't know them well, but she knew she was very interested in this job. So we really practiced and strategized, and she came up with some really creative and innovative ideas for how they could increase their sales, increase their outreach. She was reaching kind of outside of her department area, but with bigger ideas, not necessarily to implement, but to say, hey, I'm a team player and I'm also going to take my job really seriously. And you'd be lucky to have me. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's a big ask. I've never heard where they do like a whole project, almost like a mini project,
Yeah, when you get to certain positions, it depends. It also depends on the company, and it depends on, I've seen a lot of the personalities. Like there are some places where you just work so closely with people and you have to have such a level of trust that you need to know, how will this person fit into my team?
Yes.
Versus like a gigantic global corporation, it's not necessarily the same kind of thing, but you still want to know, how will this person fit and how will you fit into the bigger picture?
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me a little bit about you, as far as, obviously you're an attorney, but how did you start working with, or I guess specialize in negotiating? Like what has brought you to this place in your career?
I'm a creative problem solver. And I didn't know that that was also a negotiator until I really started to do this as part of what I do. I was in-house, like I said, for about 10 years. I was in the corporate world. And I mean, my personal story is I left the corporate world when I was pregnant and just about to have my first child. And when I was on maternity leave, the employer promoted the person who was a man who I trained above me. And when I came back from maternity leave, I was like, this isn't worth it to me. It's just not, like, they didn't value me. I was feeling poorly about myself. I figured I'd have my baby, I'd get a nanny, I'd go back to work. I was like, I created a life, I can sustain it, and I don't need this.
Yeah.
So I kind of, at that point, like flex time wasn't a thing. And I started to kind of negotiate and I was interviewing elsewhere. And I'm like, no, I need to be out on my own. And that was the walking away and the going through different negotiations, but also walking away. I mean, at that point, it was devastating, but looking back now, it was the best decision I ever made in my life. And since then, one of the things I've loved to do is help empower women to make these decisions. Men too. I definitely represent men and companies and stuff. But part of what I do also in educating my clients who are hiring people or who are going through these things or working with independent contractors or things like this is how to treat people with respect, because negotiations are really about respect. A lot of people use them as power play, and they're not. They really should be mutual respect. Are we going to do well together? What is it going to take to get us to work together? And negotiating for a corporate position is a very similar tactic to negotiating to get a car. Like, everybody wants to walk away with something that makes you happy. Like you said before, that you're satisfied, that you're fulfilled. I don't know. I think growing up too, like if I could, my parents were really good that if I could explain my way through something, I was able to get it. But I had to give a rational explanation as opposed to like, I want it or it's not fair. Like, I really had to explain through. And I think that really stuck with me as I got older.
I think that's pretty huge of your parents to have you try to explain, whatever you're trying to get?
Yep.
Because, like for me, I would ask and it would be no, like primarily because I'm one of 5 kids. But I think that's really key. And one of the things that I also know is that back to the socialization, I've read that girls' confidence peaks at age 9. And that's like 9 years old. So we need to kind of go back and use tactics like that where we empower specifically our girls so that they are problem solving from a young age instead of us as moms more than dads, jump in and try to solve the issue
for sure.
problem before we let them try to figure out. And further to that, it's okay if they fail. I think
it's awesome if they fail.
Yes.
And it's also awesome if they understand the value of gaining. Like if you fail and then you figure out a way to succeed, that's the other thing. Like my parents would explain why they were saying no. So I understood the reasoning behind it. Wasn't always about me. It was about the circumstances or them, or, when you're a little kid, everything's about you.
Yes.
And I think that that's important to raise our kids as independent human beings who can stand on their own, because if we give them everything, they're going to meet a professor. They're going to meet a boss. They're going to meet someone who's going to say no, and they're going to fall to pieces not knowing what to do.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And, kudos to your parents, because my parents, especially so I'm number 3 in a 5 from 5
Well,
kids.
we were only 2, so it might have been easier.
Okay. So my oldest sister, she always gripes about the fact that she would always ask to do something and then she would get no, but no reason, no explanation as to why. And to this day, she's like, Mom and Dad were like this and that. And then, of course,
I bet they were very different people to the 5th person.
I was just
like, just do whatever you want.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because so I'm number 3, but with kids 4 and 5, they were like, whatever.
Yeah.
So
you guys did the testing, you did the pushing. Yep.
Absolutely. But really, as parents, we could all do a better job to allow our daughters, because the boys, it just seems it's very natural, and the tendency is for them to just be confident and to go for it without anyone telling them. So I think obviously a lot of it is nature versus nurture, but for the girls, I always say, let them problem solve. Let's use empowering language, and then let them fail. Those are kind of like the 3 keys that we
and pretty is not an empowering language, and lovely is not, and quiet is not these things. But I also think it's important to work with our boys, and to have the boys and the girls work together, because that's the key. When everybody, that's the whole key, I think, in the whole anti-hate everything. If you know each other, there are no generalizations. I mean, obviously when they're little and they're in middle school, it's like ill boys, ill girls, whatever. But to really be able to maneuver together, negotiate, even negotiating, sitting at a table together.
Yes.
Little things like that really make a difference when they're adults and they're in the professional world.
Yeah. And to your point, for the boys, I always say, teach them how to be an ally, how to respect women, because I think the lack of respect to women is just not something that we teach our young boys either. So absolutely.
I have to say, it's really funny. I had a networking group where one of the male members said, there was this training that I had to go to, and it was a bunch of women who talked about what they had to deal with at work. And I think especially the women should be watching this, and the men. And I was like, and all the women in the group were like, we've lived it. We get it. We don't understand it. And then we were taught, and then kind of like a light went off, and he is a feminist and he's great. But it was like, it's still there. And it's still, when you're in the boardroom, I was bringing up the whole thing of our voice is not heard as well. Our high pitched voice is not, because by virtue of genetics, we have a higher voice, not necessarily heard as well. And this has been documented when you're in a room at a big boardroom, a corporate boardroom. So you have to, and also I think there was the whole thing about spreading out on the table, like men will sit down and put their stuff down and women will be tighter and closer. And not necessarily getting the coffee anymore, but our body language is different and our spread is different. So it is important. And I'm not saying, woman spread, but it is important to make your presence known in the boardroom, make your presence known as a woman, but also as a corporate body, that you have to hear my voice. Like there have to be different techniques that people use also. But it's so interesting because women it's been taking a long time, but I think men are definitely listening a little bit more.
Yes.
And hopefully we're all raising our kids to be, like you said, allies and equals. Or sometimes we're better, sometimes they're better. And that's Absolutely. Okay. That's what makes the business work. Like you need the collaborative listeners, you need the decision makers, and you need to be able to feed off both.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I mean, the podcast is called No Woman Left Behind, but I know that there's a lot of men out there that so support. My husband's an example. Like he supports anything that I do, my endeavors, my business, my podcast, whatever. So he's always asking me, how did you do? Like what, what's happening? So it's nice to have someone like that. That's your ally in your corner.
Oh, for sure. But he's never walked in your shoes. So as much as he's a supporter, and I have that too, I could not be doing what I do without my husband. He's never been asked, hey, do your thighs rub when you walk?
Oh God.
Like in the business or something like that. I mean, I was in the music business for 10 years. There are things that were said and I'm sure he wouldn't have even known it was there because it was never said to him or on his radar. He certainly wouldn't have been the one saying it, but just the idea that happened probably never occurred to him.
Oh my gosh. I cannot even imagine that. Crazy talk. That's crazy talk.
Yeah. I'm hoping that's a lot less now.
Yeah, me too. Now, can you come up or can you think of a couple of maybe things that you obviously have both female and male clients, and we've already talked a lot about what women do, but can you think of maybe one or two things that your male clients just do naturally that you kind of think, oh, I wish my female clients would do this?
Yeah, they just know their answers. They know what they want. They don't negotiate with themselves. It's really an amazing thing where they just this is what I want. This is how I need to get it, and do what it takes to get it. Whether I'm negotiating for them or they're negotiating for themselves, and I walk through the different points of what are the non-negotiables, what are the negotiables, that kind of thing. But it's so interesting because I've had a home office for almost 19 years, and when I would be negotiating against a male attorney or as an adversary, I would never tell him that. Because if I'm a solo practitioner, I come from a place of weakness in their eyes. Whenever I had a negotiation with an adversary who's a woman, I'd say 90% of the time I would share that information. It changed the negotiation completely. That is so wonderful. I wish I could do that. That is such a great thing. And it would just open up a dialogue. So you kind of have to know. So when I'm working with my clients too, I know when I have to be a hard ass. I know when I'm doing things. I haven't seen as much of this now since the pandemic with men because everybody's now kind of working from home. So you can't tell what's what. But that was a real eye opener for a long time. Like you definitely had to position yourself in a certain way to represent the best interests of your clients, to come from a position of strength.
That's really interesting. I would have never thought that being a solopreneur versus, coming from an entire corporation would make a difference in that negotiating.
Well, I don't think it was just the solo. It was a stay-at-home mom solo.
Oh,
that whole thing. It was because this would only happen with the men. And if I had a conversation with a woman, she's like, it was like a light bulb went off. Like, wow, you're living the dream.
Yes, of course. And of course, there's the whole situation when you quit working because you're not quit working, if you go on maternity and it happened to you where you went on maternity and then the person that you trained skipped over you and they got promoted. So more than likely, you probably would have been promoted had you stayed working, potentially, if you didn't go out on maternity leave. So women...
Oh, yeah, that's true, for sure.
Yeah. So women always lose out, in the sense of the career when you go out on maternity leave, because sometimes you're gone for 3 or 6 months. And even though they can't legally hold it against you, you also don't have this, hey, I've done all these achievements during this time. I mean, obviously having a family and, a child is a huge achievement, but not in the same way.
No, but it's like a mommy tax or like the pink tax. It's the same kind of thing, because there are a lot fewer women on a partnership track because you have to choose family versus working 80 hours a week. Now, for better or for worse, I never worked in a law firm until I opened my own. And I really value the quality of life of the in-house counsel. You get paid less, but you have a better quality of life. And I was able to go home at the end of the day. But if you want to make, partnership track at a firm, you have to be on call all the time, or in the office working all the time in a lot of particularly in the larger firms, like the white shoe firms. Or if you're in a corporate department in a massive company, and it's, or in a bank or something like that, it's a lot of hours, and you may not be promoted because either you're perceived to be, even though you're not allowed to do this legally anymore, you got married, you're going to have a kid, you're going to leave. But one of the things I've seen, flex time has proven so successful because moms work twice as hard as everyone else in half the time. And they are so loyal to their companies because they're able to keep an adult identity, because we're all, we love what we do for the most part, or we wouldn't be doing it. I mean, that may be a gross generalization. We need jobs, but to really be able to do what we want to do, and then have a company recognize that it's important to be with your family, and that makes you a better worker.
Yes.
I mean, I just think that is brilliant when that happens.
That's
like the magic formula.
Yes, that is brilliant. And I have read that corporations are now trying to treat the employee as a whole, not just the employee, but they're trying to get benefits for working out, or like the flex time. I think COVID, it was a huge, disaster, but it was a blessing in disguise, because to your point, so many of us have such a different quality of time. So as a matter of fact, I just went to a meeting to meet a bunch of coworkers, and it took me an hour to get there. And I was doing that when my kids were little, 5 days a week. And I'm thinking, like, how was I able to manage it all? Because you
did, but you were exhausted, I'm sure, and on autopilot a lot. I have so many clients who since 2020 were either let go or kind of saw an exit, or their kids were a little bit older and they're like, we don't want to do this anymore. And they have started their own businesses, and they are incredibly successful because they're doing it on their own terms. They are, like we were talking about, badasses. Like, they have all this experience of the corporate world behind them. So they know how to make the things. They know what they need. They know the finances. They know what kind of team they need to build. They have the connections, and they just run with it. And they're creating these are entrepreneurs and solopreneurs who are just creating really great things that never existed before, because they didn't have the opportunity, or it was kind of like job security. Whereas, like, I would have stayed with my company, who knows for how much longer if this didn't happen to me. I never envisioned a world where I would be like this. And I am so grateful that it happened this way. But it did give women a huge opportunity to go out on their own and create new things. And it's been awesome to be part of that and watch it.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, we've talked a lot we've talked a lot about different topics as far as negotiating. So, Elissa, can you leave us maybe with two actionable tips that women can use in their corporate jobs?
Yes. Well, I have 1.5 is my first one. And I was thinking about these. And the second one is a solid second. So we definitely talked about this. Know what you're worth and don't negotiate with yourself is the first one.
Okay.
And they definitely work hand in hand, because if you know what you're worth, you're going to go in strong, and you're not going to say, but. The second one is have a plan, because you do have to be able to say, this is what I want. This is what I don't want. This is why I'm worth this. And you should understand that, or we may just need to go our separate ways.
Well, I'm super excited about both of those, but specifically the second one, because my workbook is going to lay out that plan. So I actually have like 6 different phases, and one of them has to deal with, and I interviewed another woman by the name of Joy Selden, and she's talking about preparing emotionally. So, getting your emotional intelligence down before you even start thinking about going to negotiate, because that's kind of your first step of not negotiating with yourself first. So,
and you don't want to show, I mean, you could show joy, you could show puzzlement, but you don't want to show what's really going on back there necessarily. I'd love to see this book when this is done. This sounds amazing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really good, and especially the phrases, because the two phrases that you said that are brilliant is yes and no. It's like perfect because we can definitely incorporate that in.
But one of the things we learned in law school is the KISS system. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yes.
That's it. You don't have to go further. You don't, also, as women, we explain too much. You can say no and not explain why. And that's okay too.
And it's interesting they say that, because I've been doing that more, like I've noticed I've been doing that more like in the last year or so. Like if I need to cancel an appointment before, I'd be like, because, well, I'm like, nope, I don't need to explain.
Because your time is valuable. Yep.
Absolutely. We're all growing. All right, Elissa, any final words that you can leave our listeners with?
Believe in yourself. I mean, that's ultimately it. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay too. You never know. One of the things I learned is that you never know who's going to be around the next corner, what opportunity is going to arise. And it's not the end of the world. It is an exciting opportunity to move into something new.
Perfect. All right, Elissa. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you on the show. Elissa provided us with such great information, and I just want to go over some of my takeaways from what we talked about. First of all, she said, script what you want to say out. I think that's very important, because if you write things out, then you're going to be very clear on the points that you want to bring forward in your discussion with the person that you're interviewing with or your manager. Practice in front of the mirror. I think that's really important, because when you say things out loud, you hear how they're coming out. Sometimes you may not say something the way you intended to come out. So it's really good to hear things out loud. She also says, know what you want. So for example, if you want to negotiate a salary increase, where exactly do you want that to be? So you need to be clear on what you want. I did ask her powerful phrases, and her powerful phrases, there's 3 that she provides us. She says, yes is 1, no is number 2, and of course is number 3. In my opinion, I think there's a big difference between yes and of course, because of course shows that you're excited about the project, whereas yes, I think it's a little bit like, yes, you're going to do it, but you may not want to do it. The big key there is the powerful phrase, no. No, I'm not able to do that. But she also says that in lieu of no, you can say, can we look at some strategies that I think might work instead? So the no becomes a softer no whenever you give the person that you're talking to alternatives. Elissa provides us with 2 great tips. She says, and we've already talked about this, but just to reiterate, number 1 is know your worth. And the biggest thing about that one, she says, do not negotiate with yourself. So we talked about this in the episode, where before you even get to the conversation, you're already thinking, oh, no, I can't say that because I'm going to hurt their feelings. No, I can't say that because they're not going to like that. So stop negotiating with yourself before you get to the actual negotiation. And then tip number 2 is have a plan. And I'm going to be able to help with that because, again, I think I've said this several times already. I have created a workbook that kind of goes through the different steps that you're going to have to take. Now, each one of those steps might take you time to put it together. This is a process, you guys. It's not just a once and done. You can't sit down one day and do this whole thing. It will take time. It will take planning. But if you're serious about this is where you invest 1 hour or 2 hours a week and dedicate yourself to work on each step. But I promise you that if you go through this whole process, you will get to a great result that you're happy with, as far as from the work that you're putting in, I mean. Now, we all know that negotiating could be successful. It could not be successful, but you're never going to know if you don't do the process. And 20% of women in the corporate world never negotiate. And that's money that we're leaving on the table. So I urge you to please take the time to work on this process. And I think you will be happy with the results. Whether you get the actual dollar figure or job this time is not the point. It's for you to be prepared for that time that you're actually prepared and you are able to articulate your worth with massive confidence, conviction, and clarity. So that's the big thing here. So Elissa's contact information, of course, is always on the episode website. So please go there for her contact information. And with that, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Let these stories of self-encouragement and professional development serve as a guide in navigating through corporate America in the most practical and fulfilling way possible. Do not forget to subscribe to the show at nowomanleftbehind.com for more content like this. Leave a rating and share it with your friends because we want to make sure that no woman is left behind. Until I see you next time, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.